The judges.
How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you.
He's tardy. Call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Commissioner Allen,
Present.
Commissioner Norwood,
Here.
Commissioner Siragusa in attendance, Commissioner Roberts, Commissioner Stallings, Commissioner Orr,
Here.
and Mayor Pankinen.
Here. Okay. Thank you. Item 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda.
Mayor, I think there's one item here that we need to pull from the consent agenda.
Okay?
Let's see. Item 6.4. We need to take a look at that a little closer before we bring that back. So we'd like to pull that one from consent and bring it back in the future. Has to do with the mural.
Yeah. They're already working on the mural, are they not?
I think they may be, but I think there's some issues we need to look at with the ordinance.
Okay. All right.
I anticipate it may be back the next meeting.
Okay. All right.
And there's one small correction too on item 5.4. Kind of in the middle, I think it's highlighted
Yep.
for you,
Yep.
where it says lots and
7
not
and 8.
through.
It should be through, or it should be and.
Oh, right there it is, great. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to study items. Item 3.1, discuss the proposed 2023-2024 City of Enid budget. Hello, Aaron. Your favorite time of year?
It is my favorite time of year. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We're here to kick off the 24 budget cycle. And as of a week and a half ago on Friday, you received the electronic copy of the proposed budget that was put together by the city manager and the staff here based on input from the community, department heads, other requesters, and this is what we boiled it down to and brought forward to you as what we would like to present. Of course, at any time, if you have any questions, please stop me. Let's answer the questions as we go along. Going to take it kind of slow tonight, go over maybe a little more detail than in previous years. We have a couple new commissioners coming on. I want to make sure they understand and have the same level of understanding of what the funds are and what they do for every fund as we go through those tonight on the budget. So we are going to start off with the Municipal Budget Act timeline. There are certain requirements that are required in that budget of state law. We are required to give to the governing body a draft of the budget 30 days prior to the new fiscal year. We're required to have a budget hearing for the public 15 days prior, and 5 days before that we have to have a advertisement letting people know that there is going to be a hearing. That hearing was published Sunday and yesterday's paper. We like to get that in a Sunday paper so everybody knows about it as soon as possible. More circulation on Sundays as well. And then that budget hearing is going to be held next Thursday evening at 5 o'clock for the public to have a chance to give you guys input on the budget as it has been presented. And then at least 7 days prior to the fiscal new year, the budget has to be adopted. Typically here at the City of Enid, we push all that back about 30 days. We have one staff that handles both the budget and the audits. And so to allow timing for us to be able to get everything into the software so we're ready to roll and let people spend money come July 1, we ask for all that to be backed up. Also, our resolution is how we adopt the budget, and the resolution doesn't take effect for 30 days. And so if we can approve it by the end of May, which is what we're asking here for, then we'll be ready to spend those appropriations on July 1. This is the budget summary page, page 12. This is what's published in the paper to show the levels of projected revenues and expenditures for the year that we expect for the upcoming budget. You will see that we have a total of 177 million in estimated revenues and estimated expenditures of 183.9 million, which leaves us with a $6.4 million deficit, which we have fund balance to cover all of those deficit budgets that we are proposing in the budget this year. When you look at this, because of the legal obligations that we have for federal or for the spending limits, there are some transfers that have to happen between funds. And so whenever we roll this up, I like to present it a little different as a consolidated statement where we've removed all of those transfers. So you can see when we don't double count the sales tax coming into general fund and being transferred over to EMA to pay for that CAW debt and only count it one time, it boils down to we only bring in 104 million as opposed to the 177 million that is shown in the budget document, because that's what we're required to do for the Municipal Budget Act. The budget expenses, when you remove all of that, is 110.9. Again, still the same $6.4 million deficit budget. One other thing I want to point out on this slide, fund balance. So as a question, some of these you will see have quite a bit larger fund balances than other funds. We have two types of funds in the city. We have governmental funds and we have enterprise funds. The accounting for governmental funds do not allow us to recognize assets in those funds. They are booked at the government-wide level, whereas the enterprise funds do have assets in their funds. So even though EMA is a perfect example, they are an enterprise fund. It shows that they have 188.6 million. That's including their assets. That's not cash sitting in that account. So just want to point out there is a difference. The ones that are really high have assets in there as well as cash. Just want to give you a little context of what that consolidated revenue history looks like here. We have been kind of up and down between 90 and we're up to that 104 million this year. There are basically three groups of revenues that make up the majority of the city's budget, and that is general fund, the main one there is sales tax. EMA is the utility revenues from running water, sewer, and trash, and then all other fund activities are in that green there to give you history. Breakdown of revenue by type across 104. So again, sales tax makes up for the budget that we're proposing 42.4 million. So 40% of our revenue is sales and use tax. 36% is utility fees, and that's made up of water, wastewater, solid waste, stormwater, and other miscellaneous utility revenues. And then the other types that fall in here that rise up to the level, I've just broken out the ones that are above the $2 million mark, and that is franchise fees, which is 2.6 million, TIF funds, which are pass-through funds that come to the city through the county, through county property tax, and are passed along for those TIF agreements we have, and that's 2.7 million. Woodring Airport has operations that bring in approximately 2.7 million. Stride Bank Center has operations that bring in operations of revenue of 2.8 million, and then we are anticipating already in hand $3.9 million of grants. There are other grant applications are out there, and then if we're awarded those, we'll bring those back as appropriations throughout the year, but these are the ones we know of at this time. So altogether, the remaining funds are 9%, and they are made up by hotel tax, interest earnings, golf revenue, gasoline tax, fines, fees, forfeitures, all those types of revenue that come into the city. When we do a comparison year over year for the budget revenue, we have general fund showing a $1.16 million increase year over year, and that is made up, we did include a 4% increase in sales tax revenue, which is more conservative than where we're ending this year. Just slightly, we want to make sure we're on the side where we're not having to come back and do cuts later on. We'd rather come back and award additional items, so a little conservative there. We also have an increase in general fund revenue on beverage tax and interest. We do have that offset some by some fees that are going down. We have $175,000 less in police fines and fees, and a lot of that's due to maybe some staffing shortages and other things that are playing into that. And then we have franchise fees that's going down by $135,000, and that's mainly attributable to the cable franchise agreement. Just seeing a lot less use coming through there as far as numbers of people who are subscribing to cable internet. So I'm sure none of you are surprised by that. And then we have also, last year we had higher amounts in there from miscellaneous because we did have the sale of the Great Plains Bank building and some other one-time sale of assets that we are not anticipating in this year. So all of that netted together for a $1.1 million increase in revenue to general fund. In EMA, we have almost a decrease of $1 million. And there's the same type of combination of ups and downs that are making that up. We have increases in utility revenue of $875,000. We have interest increasing by $820,000. And again, the sales tax increase here of 4% from the current year. We also have decreases. Last year in the budget, we had a $2.3 million remaining on that $4 million loan from OWRB. So that one-time revenue is gone for this year. And then also we had some sales of some assets over here, mainly some trash trucks that we were leasing that we sold back when we had balloon payments on those that we're not anticipating in this year. So that's the majority of what's playing into that. And then you see the all remaining funds is a $4.1 million decrease. And basically there's a couple of increases on grants and all the rest is decreases related to grants. And so we had the P3 award for the airport, which was $4.25 million last year. We have the $3.2 million in COVID CV2 funds through CDBG. Those are deducts. We did get awarded 2 grants, one for an industrial trail or industrial road on 54th Street related to a TIF. And then we also were awarded a TAP grant through the Oklahoma Department of Transportation to do a Prairie View Trail. And so both of those have been included in this budget, which offsets some of that. We also did receive one other energy grant for the event center, which is going to help replace some of their control system and make it be a little more efficient on their utility bills over there. Now we're going to jump over to the expense history. Just overall, just kind of gives you a breakout of kind of the categories and how it's progressed over time, give and take based on what the priorities are in the budget in each given year. Personnel has been historically 33 to 36% of the budget. We have operations in red that show 27 to 35%, a lot bigger swings in that category. Capital outlay, 13 to 23%, and then debt, 15 to 21% of the budget. And you'll see there's a pretty significant increase this year as we bring on the full payments for Call Lake, starting in this budget that we're presenting here tonight. The breakout for this year specifically, 36% of the budget is personnel, 33% in operations, 13% in capital outlay, and 18% in debt services. Which equates to personnel increases about $2.2 million over all funds across the city. Operations went down by $2.9 million. Capital outlay went down by $4.3 million, and debt services went up by $2.9. So overall, our expenditures decreased $2.1 million, which is a 1.87% decrease in the budget. So when we look at the expense comparison year over year, again, we have the same categories we had before. General fund, 261, 410. Slight increases there for personnel and utility costs. And we're seeing those across the city, not just in general fund, but all funds. EMA, we have increases in personnel and utilities, but we also have 3.1 million more in loan payments this year than what we did last year for our debt services on Call Lake, and then also the water line loan that we just took out for $4 million in the current fiscal year that we're in. All other funds, overall decrease of 5.4 million. Again, that P3 grant for 4.5 million in airport, 3 million for CV2 and CDBG, and then the EEDA had a 2015 loan for the academy incentive that paid off in this last fiscal, so we don't have that continued expenditure in this year. As we look at all that, you've noticed, I've said we have 6.445 million in deficit fund balance. So how can we do that? So I just want to talk about any of the unbalanced funds so you understand how those are being funded or how we're proposed that they be funded. General fund, we are proposing a $1,067,000 deficit. We are projecting to bring in more than that in the current fiscal year that we're in revenue that will go unexpended, so it will add to the fund balance, and so we would just like to move that over to next year to use those funds that will already have been collected this year. Special projects is kind of hit and miss. It depends on timing, depends on what they have gotten as far as seizures and forfeitures and what they're going to spend, and they build it up and then they spend it. We always budget for them to spend more than what they actually do spend, and they have a fund balance right now to be able to take care of any purchases that the police department may make out of there for those programs. Airport fund is projecting a slight increase, and that's just from their operations. A lot of that has to do with the projected sales for the base closure for their runway. And so if it does better, they will even close more to their fund balance, but that will help offset some of all the projects that they're doing out there that they have a grant share on. And so they're doing a great job with that, and we'll continue to build that up as we need to. Enid Municipal Authority, we have a deficit budget of $2.6 million. We do have fund balance available. This is basically the fund that covers most of the expenditures that we need to do for capital, and so it just depends on the level of capital expenditures that we need to do. But again, with sales tax coming in higher, we will have part of this money, but they have the rest of it available in fund balance. The rest of it will come in this year. We'll still have a healthy reserve so that we're able to take care of emergencies as they may come up in the next budget year. Economic Development Authority, typically EMA funds this fund to do all the activity that we need to for economic development. This year, you can see we are proposing to not fund them from EMA at all. We are proposing to draw down their fund balance. They have about a $3 million fund balance right now, and we want to go ahead and use those funds towards those activities which they were already earmarked for previously, so that close that gap a little bit more in EMA and just brought it down here to economic development where it was already available. Stormwater fund, these are a specific fee that is on everybody's water bill, and so whatever we collect is what we move over, and then based on the projects that are proposed by engineering and decided to be funded by city management, it's less this year, so there's a little bit of a surplus that will close to that fund balance, and there are other years that will expend significantly more. It just depends on what improvements are needed in that area for the city. Capital project escrow fund, this is for stormwater basins and development fees, and so as businesses come in and we develop fees or we develop areas, sometimes there's stormwater work that needs to be done in those basins. It collects in this fund, and again, it collects slowly over time. They'll do a project, so we will spend more than what we collect in that 1 year, but it will be from the fund balance that's been collected over several years to make those improvements. Police fund, you see is a big deficit there, $1.7 million. They have a lot of items that they are planning to do for capital in this next year, and I'll let them share that with you in this next meeting next week. But he has the fund balance available, a little over $4 million in their fund balance right now, and they've been saving up to do some of these capital items that are finally going to come to fruition in this next budget. And then fire, again, with their public safety tax, they have a little excess that they're not going to be spending in capital this next year that they'll save. I'm sure they have plenty of things lined out that they want to spend that on in future years, so help just to put it back in their fund balance so it's available for those bigger purchases for their ladder trucks and whatever else may be coming up in the next few years. So that's the general overview. Here again is that same slide that we had, and tonight we're going to cover some specific funds. There are 7 funds that we're going to cover tonight, and they're highlighted in yellow up here. We're going to go over the general fund, the health fund for the city, the Enid Municipal Authority budget, the Advanced Development Authority budget, the Community Development Block Grant Fund, the Sinking Fund, and EPTA. And then again, next week we have special meetings on Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday, we're going to come back and hit all these ones that are in blue, which will be the public safety ones. So we have special projects, 911, police and fire. We'll have airport and golf here, along with EEDA, and we'll have representative from ERDA here to speak on that. And then the event center fund, we'll have Jeff Bemis, our operations manager over there, and they'll also talk about visiting it. So that will be on Tuesday next week, and then on Thursday next week, Morali and his staff have center stage, and we'll go over the capital plan and what all is included in the budget for this next year for the capital plan, as well as the budget hearing for the public to be able to give input to anything that's been presented so far. So when we talk about just general fund, year-over-year variances, that $1.1 million that we talked about, here is where you see that $1.5 million increase in sales tax year over year, and that's a 4% increase from where we are. We are projecting to come in actually at $41.3 million in sales tax collections this year if we remain on track for the remaining 2 months now. Franchise fees, again, we do actually have 2 ONG and OG&E that have gone up, and I'm sure you've noticed that on your own personal bills, little higher fee, and so with that comes a higher franchise fee because of the percentage of your bill. And so each of those line items have increased $20,000, and then again the cable franchise $175,000 decrease in that line item, which is the top of where it may come in this year. So we realize that that's going to be a trend that continues as people move to streaming services more and more, I think. Police fines, again, continuing trend to go down. We're down 22% from last year in police fines. And again, a lot of that's attributable to shortages of staffing and just some changes that have been made there with the jail and some other items. Beverage tax is collected through the state and distributed to us. We are projecting to bring in $344,000 this year, and we raised that $20,000 based on the 3- and 5-year averages when we looked at that. It's trending up a little bit. And again, the miscellaneous is the net of adding some interest and decreasing the Great Plains Bank building and some other minor changes in there that needed to happen with the pool and some other areas based on averages. All the remaining revenues are projected to be the same as the current year. General fund expenses, again, breaking out into the main areas that we have, the categories of the budget. We have an increase in personnel of $570,000. In the general fund, that is a 4.86% increase in personnel. There are 225 employees in the general fund. And of those, 163 are full-time, 13 part-time, and 49 seasonal. We have a net increase of 1 position in this budget this year. Operations are $270,000. Those same utility fees that are increasing for you are increasing for us too. So electric, gas, phone lines, all of that. We do have a slight increase there of 3.42%. And then capital outlay, which makes up 68% of the budget, we have a decrease for equipment purchases, $579,500 in equipment this year versus last year we had a little over $1 million. We were able to fund some of those requests in this current year with appropriations we already have to help make the numbers that we were targeting for the budget this year. So,
Aaron,
yes.
on the increase in personnel, does that include the people that'll be working out on West Chestnut at the new water treatment?
No, that, they are included in the EMA budget, and we're gonna get to those in just a little bit. This
Okay.
is just for cost of living and health increases, and there's one additional position budgeted in this fund. Of the 225, it's a 4.86% increase to the personnel for those 225 positions. Yes, all right, capital outlay. We have sales tax transfers to EMA. That went up $767,000 for the 2% that's transferred to EMA, for the 1% for capital items and 1% for Call Lake. So that's a 4% increase in that line item. And then we have operational transfers to other funds, increased 0.48%, sending more to the fire department by about $400,000 and less to police, golf, and EEDA than in the current year. When we look at expenditures broken out, again, here we have personnel makes up 20% of the general fund budget. Operations, all those supplies and contractual agreements, 12%. The capital equipment's 1%. The transfer to police is 17%, fire's 15%. Other funds for their operations, which is BDA, golf, EPTA is 1%, and then the capital and call sales tax are 17% each. So overall, we have an increase of 1.125, and expenditures are 1.9% increase in the budgeted expenditures for the year. At this time, I have up here the page numbers and the proposed budgets from this year and the adopted, or proposed for next year, and the adopted budget for this year with the variance for each of the departments. I'm happy to go over any of those departmental budgets if you have questions. If not, it's just a summary to look at what those changes are. Most of them are very minor changes and again are attributable to one of those two things, utilities or personnel.
Do we want to pass out binders to them in case they want to follow along with hard copy? That'd probably be, I didn't realize. Yes, that'd be easier than trying to look at the
Yeah.
screens. And then the page numbers will make sense,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, and they should make sense with the PDF version also.
Yeah. So you have one.
Okay.
Any, if you have any questions.
I thought you were going to give us a page to turn to.
The pages are on the slide of the individual
second
budget. So
column.
administration starts on page 25. If that's a budget you want to look at individually for operational, we can do that.
And that pretty much goes in order.
Yeah, these are all in order because they're all general funds, so. Administration overall has a $14,000 decrease that we're proposing. Human Resources has an $11,725 increase. Legal has a $76,000 increase. Safety has an increase of $16,635. Communications, page 37, has a $22,310 increase. $27,000 of that is personnel. General government has a $6,910 increase. It's to do with utilities again in that area. Accounting, $55,250, $48,000 of that is personnel. Records and receipts, a whole $155, net increases. So information technology, $67,075, and a lot of that is attributable software maintenance. The softwares keep going up, and we keep adding new efficiencies for departments, and a lot of those software renewals are housed here in the IT department. And so the culmination of, I don't know, maybe 25 different things that are listed on page 50 have gone up from year over year, attributable to most of that increase for $65,000. Next one is community development, and in the budget before you, community development and the code department have been combined into one department, so you'll see the combined numbers there. When we're looking at year over year and combined, it's a $40,000 decrease. A lot of that's attributable to personnel. We had some really long-term employees who retired, and as we fill those, then it nets a savings to some of those positions.
Aaron, since we have time.
Yeah.
And just as we work through these, each one of these that she's going through is a department in the general fund, and there's about 30 of them or so. And if you have, this is pretty much how we'll go through it. If you have specific questions, you might just orient them on the page. It tells them the personnel, breaks it down, gives them detail. So as we're going through it, and since we have time, that might be helpful for some of you. And if it's not, then just tell us and we'll just keep going.
All right. So we can just look at community development. So at the very top of the page, it tells you the fund and the department name. Then right under that has a program description. So it's just a short 2 or 3 sentence about what the department does, what they're responsible for, maybe some statistics on some of them. And then right under that is the proposed staffing for 23-24. It identifies if they are full-time, part-time, seasonal positions. And then under that, we have breakdown for the general fund. It's just expenditures. The individual departments do not have revenues. And so our first column has the account number, the account description of what it is. Then we have last year, or the current year that we're in's budget, and then the proposed budget for next year, and the percent and dollar amount increase, decrease year over year. The pages that follow each of those give a more broken down description of what makes up those numbers. So we have $5,500 for training, seminars for community development. If you go over to page 53, the breakdown for that $5,500 shows that it's $2,000 for CEUs, $300 for an online ICC course, and then $3,200 for building inspectors to have the training they need. So it gives you a little more detail on what goes into each of those numbers for each of the departments. Questions on how that layout works? Okay. And next we have engineering on page 55. $37,000 increase. We have personnel increases of $74,000, and then professional services went down $49,000, which had to do with timing of some GIS pictometry things that aren't every year. They're every other or every 3 years. They kind of get rotated through. So next on page 59, we have the Public Works Management Department, an increase here of $69,000. 54,000 of that is attributable to personnel, and the rest of it is a big chunk of it is utilities, and then uniforms, as we've added some people to this department that were in other departments before, and I don't think all their uniforms got moved over from the other department, so we're fixing that in the budget that we're presenting to you this year. Next budget is fleet maintenance. It's on page 61. Again, here we only have a $10,000 increase. Utilities is $1,800 of that, and vehicle labor parts is the majority of the rest of that for fleet operations. They work on vehicles for all of the city, police, fire, everyone in the city. Parks and Recreation is on page 64. Again, we have $136,000 $100,000 increase in this fund. $125,000 is attributable to personnel. During the current year that we're in, we added 2 positions to this budget, which is netted against one other decrease that gave us that 1 increase in the budget. There were some pressing needs in that department, so the city manager authorized additional positions in this department. And so you're seeing the impact of that in the new budget that we have. We have enough appropriations to cover them in the current year within the general fund. Other than that, there's some slight increases to take care of, again, utilities at our park facilities, $15,000.
So Aaron?
Yes, sir.
Are these all the calculations that we see throughout the year, annually through our claims list? Is that what this is?
Yes, yeah. You don't see the personnel on the claims list, but all the other maintenance and operations and the capital items, you see all of those. Debt service payments are the other ones you don't see on the claims list. So those are the 2 pieces that happen outside of that process, but everything else comes through the claims list. Next is the street department. It's on page 67. And again, we have an increase of $208,000 here. $140,000 of that is utilities, and this is where we pay for all the street lights, traffic lights, all of that. And so biggest user of utilities by far. So that's where the majority of that is. And then we also have some vehicle repairs that are increasing, and then cost of diesel. Next budget is on page 70. It's technical services. This is an increase of $111,000. $67,000 is personnel, which is about a 6% increase. And then again, utilities is $29,000, professional services $6,000 to make up the rest of that $111,000 increase. And the last department in the general fund is library, and that's on page 73. Overall, there's a $65,000 increase to this budget. $42,000 of that is personnel, which is a 5% increase. Other than that, they have done a fabulous job of bringing in donations, community partnerships, and so we have increased their expenditure line for donations because they have continued to bring that in year over year. So that's a good news story on why that is increasing, because we have the revenue to offset it. So.
Are we gonna circle back and talk about these individually, Joe? Is this the last time we're gonna talk about the library in this?
We can talk about, we can talk about the general fund anytime we want any department in it. We just need to put the,
I just didn't understand whether we're making a quick pass through and then come back and deep dive in certain ones of them, because this is one that we need to deep dive,
okay,
I believe.
okay.
And talk about adding people and why we're adding people and
Sure.
those kinds of things.
So what we'll need to do probably is on one of our upcoming special meetings, we'll probably just need to circle back to this is helpful to tell us the departments you'd like to know more about or talk about or deep dive on. That will help us prepare the presentation for that,
Okay.
facilitate that.
I just didn't know what your plan was.
Well, we were going to talk about general fund, all these other funds, and then I think we had something planned for Tuesday and then something for Thursday, but we can always change that or add to it.
No, if there was a plan to come back to it, then I don't have a problem. I just didn't want to let go by and then next week sometime somebody says, well, we already talked about that.
Each of the special agendas will be written so that we can talk about anything, but there'll be a specific agenda, I guess, or
Right, so
Number of
at
funds
this
that we talk
time, this
about.
is the night, we have planned to talk about this, but if there's specific items I need to know so that we can plan accordingly to address those and come back to them next week.
Okay.
Are there any besides library that we would like to bring back out of any of these departmental budgets for general fund?
Not that we've passed so far.
Okay. I will make a note of that for Jennifer to present to you next week. All right. The next fund that we have up that we're going to discuss tonight is the health fund. The health fund is an internal service fund. So what that means is we collect fees from all of the departments for our personnel and move those funds over into the health fund, and we run a self-administered health care program. It is ran so that goods or services are provided to government's other departments at a cost reimbursement basis. So what happens is the department pays the employer's share of the health premiums, and it gets transferred over into this fund. The employees have a deduction from their paycheck for their part of the premium that's also transferred into this fund. And so all of that revenue gets put together in the fund to pay the claims for the benefits that are offered to the city employees. The things that are ran through this fund are medical, our pharmacy plan, dental, vision, life insurance, and then wellness benefits for our employees. Those expenditures, we have an outside consultant, Holmes Murphy, who we work with that does analysis of our claims history and industry trends and helps guide the HR and city manager, city management as to what they project those claims are going to be going forward, and to make sure that we have enough coming in to fund the claims that we anticipate there to be. We like to have this fund have a little bit of fund balance in it because there can be catastrophic events that happen that are beyond the normal trends that we see. Right now, we have a projected fund balance in the health fund of $3.8 million. We project to have revenues of 5.5 this year, or this next year. We projected to have 5.7 this year. This one's kind of a moving target. Our health plan is on a calendar year basis, but we're presenting right now on the fiscal year basis. So not really sure what those trends are going to look like. We have bids out right now for RFPs for services to make sure we're still getting the best deal for all these services for the city. And we'll continue to evaluate that and make sure that that comes in line with where we have projected for this next year's budget. We also, in this fund, do pay for stop loss insurance to kind of help cushion some of those really large expenditures. We have a high claim for individual at $175,000. So if we have more than that amount of claims for an individual, the stop loss insurance kicks in and pays us back for anything that's incurred over that. And then we also have an aggregate stop loss. So if our claims trend of what we're budgeting for, if it comes in 125%, so 25% over where we have budgeted, that kicks in and it starts paying everything for the entire plan. So we have a little protection built in, but we need a little cushion to cover that 25% overage if it happens to have, if we have a really catastrophic year. Any questions on how that works with the funding for our health fund for our employees? Okay. The next one is the CDBG fund, and it's on page 137. See, overall, we have a decrease from $4.2 million in revenue and expenditures to $1 million in revenues and expenditures. And of course, this is a balanced budget, just as it is every year. Whatever we bring in from the HUD program, we plan to expend all of those dollars. And so that decrease is attributable to the CV2 funds that we got from the Department of Commerce this year that we hopefully will get all spent by the end of the year for $3 million. You'll see up on the slide, there's a total of projects of $491,000. That is what is being proposed for the upcoming funding year. You'll see that we have revenue higher than that of almost $1 million. We have some current projects in the works that have not been expended. So we have several years that are open right now, plus this current year that we're funding, and all of that is included in the budget so we can take care of finishing all of those out. Laura's been very diligently working to get some of those older years closed out, and I think that we're getting close to getting a couple of those older years closed out and some program funds reallocated to be used for the city. What was discussed by the Funding Commission, I believe, last week and will be brought back before this commission on May 16th for consideration is the list of projects above. And Laura will go into more detail on that on the 16th meeting to tell you what they're proposing. I just got the list from her and added it on here so you could get a preview of what those were. to be coming to you next time for consideration of how that allocation will be spent. The allocation is not identified in the budget. All we're doing is saying, this is how much we've been awarded and this is how much we're gonna spend. So the allocation of how you want it to be spent is separate from the budget document itself.
So the amount we get from the federal government is not reflected on this page?
It's $491,970 on page 138. It's a breakdown because there's several years that are open here. So we have FY22 still open, $309,100. We have FY20 CARES money left open of $27,000. Then this year's that's up here on the slide right now is the $491,970. And then we have also FY19 through 21 program years, we have 207 left open on those right now. So the total of all those is that $1,035,000, which includes the funding for the upcoming year.
And we have to have that money spent in a specific amount of time, and it will be brought back to you where we are with that. We were fortunate to find all of it because it could have gone back, but you will address that soon.
It all has to be spent by May 31st, I believe. Or else we won't get any more the following year. So May 31st is the deadline date that we have to spend this money.
For which year?
Oh,
It's got several years worth. So I think each one's got a different deadline, right?
Yes.
right, but it's each year.
And a lot of those deadlines are to obligate money, not to have it spent. And so maybe just to bring it back to award a contract or for Laura to do a contract that's under the threshold that doesn't need to come to commission. So I know she's diligently working to get all that taken care of.
Yeah.
All of our contracts now and in the past have said have to be expended by June 30th. So we're actually, everybody's on notice. If they don't have them expended by June 30th, that means we can take that money back and reallocate it through our current mechanisms of the funding committee to the city commission.
I will say, of some of that really older unallocated money, we do have a bid opening on May 19th to possibly put a new restroom facility at Government Springs North. So we'll see how that bid looks when we open it, and that is a possible use of some of that older unallocated money that wasn't spent.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Stallings?
Yeah, I think
Flip the page.
yeah,
Tell me to flip the page.
Okay.
yeah.
Again, the details are behind the main page. So if you just, flip the page. You
Yeah,
got
it's
there.
multi-year money. It confuses it when you're looking at a single year budget. So the rest of
Yes.
it.
I found it when I flipped the page.
Oh,
Yes, so you'll be hearing more about how they want to allocate that. The budget just gives us the legal appropriations for them to be able to spend it when it comes in. The funding committee recommendation will be on the agenda next time for you guys to consider for approval. Next one's the sinking fund. This is a fund that doesn't get a whole lot of activity throughout the year. Basically, the Oklahoma Constitution has established sinking funds for exclusive purposes, one of which is to pay judgments that are accrued against municipalities. And so what this has been used for in the city's history since I've been here is for workers' comp judgments against the city, and also if we have any GO bonds levied, it would come through the sinking fund process. Right now, we do not have any GO bonds, so it is just workers' comp judgments. And anytime we have a workers' comp judgment that's over $20,000 per ordinance, that's brought to you for consideration of whether we do levy that and put it on the tax rolls. If we do, this is just where it comes in, and we pay it out, and then we get paid back over 3 years from the tax rolls to collect all the funds for that. Questions on how the sinking fund works or the purpose of it for the city?
This is probably a time to note that the city operates off of sales tax, essentially sales tax solely. You showed some additional fees, franchise fees. This is for property tax for judgments, like she said, but that's not available to us for operations. Just clarifying for everybody. And we always budget pretty much the same, I think, based on our judgments. So I just want to be clear, the city does not get property tax for anything other than judgments that are approved by this body and levied through the county.
absolutely.
Right.
Then once a year, you request based on those, you request the money, so.
Yes, based on what's been approved by this commission to place on there. All right. If you don't have questions there, then we're going to move on to the Enid Municipal Authority and talk a little bit about that as a whole and then those individual budgets. So the revenue for EMA is broken out above. 34% of the revenue in EMA is made up from sales tax, and another 34% is made up from water sales. 3% is stormwater fees that are collected, 10% trash services, 16% wastewater fees, and then miscellaneous is 3% of the budget. In the current budget, we have budgeted an increase of $500,000 in water based on trends and the rates that are effective in January each year for 2% increase in water rates. And that is also accounting for the reuse water. Last year was the first year that we had reuse water, so we're getting a little better feel of where that's going to be coming in as far as the revenues there. Stormwater, we have increased the revenue by $40,000. This is a monthly per month charge per utility counts, $5.39. We have a 3-year average coming in of $2.01 million. This year, we're showing that we're going to bring in $2.04 million, so we did increase that up to $2 million from the previous 1.96. Trash services, this is commercial trash pickup, so dumpsters, residential trash pickup, and the landfill, all three. We're anticipating a $145,000 increase, and we're seeing more usage in the landfill and commercial. Residential rates for trash pickup has not changed in quite some time. Wastewater, we are increasing by $190,000, and of course that's tied to, as water sales go up, our sanitary sewer is gonna go up as well because it's tied to the same amount of gallons that are coming in or going out, unless you have the, some of it, of course, is not going down wastewaters through sprinklers and other things. That's why you might see a little bigger increase in water than in sewer. The miscellaneous, we have a decrease of $1.8 million, and again, largely attributable to the OWRB loan proceeds of $2.3 million, but then offset by some increased interest that we're earning in this fund. And then again, 4% increase in sales tax for $767,000. So those are the revenues that are coming into the Enid Municipal Authority. Expenditures for EMA start on page 149. On page 149 and 150 is a roll-up of all of the EMA departments. There are 8 EMA departments that make up these totals. And behind these roll-ups, there's individual budgets that we'll get into. Again, here we see personnel increases. Let me back up. The overall for the department or the fund is $264,000 decrease. Personnel increase $480,000 or 10% increase. There are 80 employees in this fund, and we have 78 full-time and 2 part-timers in this fund. We have added 2 additional staff members specifically for the new water treatment plant. We've already have 1 in the current budget we're in. We're adding 2 more so that we can start learning. They can start learning and doing some of the mechanical stuff behind or in-house to learn before we plan to bring on some of the plant operators, which I think will be 4 or 5, somewhere in that range, that will be worked out, and we'll bring those on as soon as we need to do that. It may not be in this budget year, but if it is, then we'll take care of what we need to do there at that time. It's just going to depend on the construction timeline and where we're at. Operations, we have an increase of $419,000 or 5%, sorry, and $243,000 of that is increased utility fees across all those departments, running all those pumps and generators for the water and wastewater and sewer lift stations and all the things that go along with running the utility. There's also an increase in here for operations related to the SOBR contract. SOBR is the group who runs our wastewater management plant, and there is a built-in formula of how their compensation is calculated based on a whole bunch of indicators, economic indicators. And unfortunately, last year that got missed, so it's doubly corrected this year to get the increase from last year and this year. So that's why there's a little more significant increase than what would normally happen. It had been budgeted flat in last year's budget and didn't get that increase in there. Transfers, we have a $3.3 million decrease. And I have a slide that's going to break out exactly what that is, so I'll wait till we get there. Capital outlay, the same thing that we saw in general fund where we had a lot of requests. Couldn't fund everything to get to the budget numbers that we wanted to get to. Actually, so we have about $1 million less in equipment. However, about half of that, I think we're going to be able to fund in this year. There is a dump truck for consideration on the agenda tonight that was not budgeted, but was a request for next year that got cut out. We have current year appropriations to do that. And then there's also a front load trash truck that we're looking at doing again this year with the current appropriations we have that should be coming back in June to award to help offset some of that. We also have a lot of equipment on order that's been delayed and back ordered because of supply chain issues. And so they will continue to get new equipment in during the new year, even though we only have, excuse me, $614,000 in capital outlay for this year for this fund. And then again, we have a $3.1 million increase in debt payments that I talked about earlier, attributable to the colleague. This is the breakdown of transfers to other funds. And so we can see overall general fund is the very same that it was this year as far as supplement from municipal authority. Oklahoma is the only state in the United States that local municipalities are only funded through sales tax. A lot of other places get property tax or income tax or other fees and that's just not the structure of how Oklahoma's set up. And so in order for general fund to be able to fund everything that's needed for public safety largely, we have to have a supplement to be able to fund at the level of services we would like to provide for our citizens. A lot of these other funds, we have street and alley, CIF, street improvement, SSCIF, stormwater, water capital. All of those will be covered in depth by Morali next week. There is a lot of fluctuation from year to year, so it's not unusual to see that fluctuation. It's based on what is the most important projects to be funded that year. EEDA, here's where you'll see that we don't have any supplement. We're drawing down from that $3 million fund balance, so there's no transfer to the Economic Development Authority this year. And then you'll see a slight increase in the event center budget, and there are a couple things that are driving that with some lower hotel tax and projected, and then a grant that we got for some capital upgrades there that needs some matching funds to be able to do that. So overall, the decrease on transfers is $3.3 million. Street and alley was a decrease of $467,000. EEDA was a decrease of $1.288. Or Capital Improvement Fund was a decrease of 2.16. Street Improvement Fund was an increase of 1.89. Sanitary sewer was an increase of 175,000. Stormwater increased 40,000. Water capital decreased by 1.7 million, and the event center fund increased by 153,000. And then here are the debt payments for EMA for the year. On pages 142 through 147 of the budget book are all of the amortization schedules for all the loans that are currently outstanding for the city. They are listed up here as well. We have a 2009 loan that has $2.5 million left of principal and interest outstanding. That was used to upgrade do the automated meter systems for the city. That loan pays off in September of 2030. We have a 2010 water reclamation facility loan through OWRB that was to build the new wastewater plant. And that has $19.8 million remaining in principal and interest and pays off in March of 32. We have 5 notes total for the Call Lake program. There's a 2016, 2018 FAP, 2018 SRF, 2019 FAP, 2020 SRF. The total of all of those for Call Lake is $452.4 million in outstanding principal and interest due. The longest one, it pays off in March of 2053. And then that last one there, the 2022 OWRB water lines, is $2 million left in principal, and that pays off in March of 25. And again, all of our loans that are currently outstanding are through Oklahoma Water Resources Board. We have a mix of FAP and SRF notes. The FAP notes are funded all up front, so we have those dollars. If they haven't been expended, like some on Call Lake, they're sitting on bank account earning interest. The SRF loans are drawdowns, and so we haven't drawn down everything, but the interest of the debt schedule includes as if we have drawn down everything. So that is fully included in here when we look at these numbers for future payoffs. Questions on any of our debt payments for the municipal authority? It's a total of $476.8 million in outstanding debt. Okay. And then this is the same thing that we saw from general fund. It has each department up here, has the page number, the proposed budget for this year, upcoming year, the current year, and what the variance is. So we'll just start on page 156. That's the EMA operations budget. There are some slight increases in professional services here having to do with credit card fees. We're getting more and more people paying online through Invoice Cloud, which is great, speeds up turnaround time, and so very small fee in comparison of that 40% of our revenue that we're collecting for utility fees. Other than that, we have an increase in those transfers that I just went through, a decrease in the debt payments, which nets us a decrease of $106,000 total in this department for EMA operations. Next budget is on page 157, and that's for the utility services department. It's where you come in and start and stop services, and they have an overall increase of $18,775, and $18,200 of that is attributable to personnel increases, 4%. And then we have kind of a net wash. We have plus $93,000 for professional services, but minus $92,000 in postage. We've outsourced our bill printing, and so that's just shifted where that payment is going. And so we're not paying the postage, we're paying the postage through our professional services contract to get those bills out to our customers. Okay, solid waste services is next, is on page 160. Total increase of $37,000. They actually do have an increase of $205,000 in personnel. A lot of this is attributable to some CDL requirements and some changes that were made after the budget was approved last year. We also did add one part-time position for a landfill attendant to help offset some of the overtime costs of managing and the scale house, to make sure that we had somebody out there to run that on the weekends and everything like we needed. That increase was offset by some lower lease purchase payments, because we did have 3 trucks that just paid off, and so we have lower lease payments as a result. Public Utilities Management's on page 163. This department houses David Hunter, our water superintendent, or public utilities manager, and the environmental people, and then administrative assistants to this division. And so overall, we have an increase here of $21,685. $16,000 of that is attributable to personnel, or 6% increase. The rest is mainly attributable to computer equipment that needed to be upgraded this year for that department. Then on page 166, we have water production. And again, this increase is $377,000. $168,000 of that is attributable to personnel for those 2 full-time positions that we added that are called maintenance mechanics. So people who are going to make sure that everything's running smoothly for our new plant, learning all that from the get-go. We also have $160,000 increase in utilities, and again, a lot of that's pump stations for all of our pumps that we're making sure we have water available, and then $125,000 increase in royalties based on how much we pump, and then some of the newer agreements are different amounts, and so we needed to get that adjusted to get it in line with what we've actually been paying in the last couple of years. Other than that, we have some increases in chemicals and computer equipment, and I think some of that's getting ready for the new plant as well. Just some smaller purchases to get them up to speed with the software and things they need to know. On 169 is utility maintenance department. These are the guys who make sure that all the water is flowing to your house and away from your house to the wastewater plant. They take care of all those lines all throughout the city. So this is their budget, and they have an increase of $107.7 thousand. $71,000 or 6% is attributable to personnel. And the majority of the rest of that is, again, tools, parts, and supplies. So a lot of things that are in the ground are getting older or more obsolete, and maybe a little more difficult for them to find what they need. But as we are upgrading some of those lines, then we have a big variety of stuff, and so they just need a little more money for their materials to make sure that they have what they need to fix all those different unique breaks that they come across. Wastewater plant management increase, page 172. We have an increase of $252,000 in this budget. And again, $241,000 of it is contractual services, 2 pieces really. $163,000 I talked about already for the Stover contract. That's really 2 years worth of increases reflected there, even though we've paid higher in the current year we're in based on that contract. And then utilities, again, hitting everywhere. They're a high user, it's operating 24/7. They needed more money in their utilities to cover what their bills are actually coming in at. And then on 175 is the capital equipment replacement. So this is where we talked about there's only $614,000 this year, but we are going to be funding about $500,000 before the end of this year in equipment. That was number one and number 2 priority for this division in their budget request. And so that dump truck will be on the meeting tonight, and we'll bring back the front load trash truck in June for you for consideration. And then the rest of the money in here is for GPS route software, and then the normal $600,000 that we spend every year for AMI parts to upgrade that infrastructure and make sure that we have everything communicating and talking where it needs to be. Questions on any of these individual budgets or anything more in depth that we need to go into?
I'd like to know more about the Stover contract, the history, and what it really cost us per year. I couldn't glean that from what you just went through.
Okay. Anything else on any of these that we'd like brought back? Okay. We have next Advanced Development Authority. It's on page 180. And this is a pretty simple budget. Pretty much it funds Mike Cooper's contract to be a liaison for us and his expenditures that go along with that. Other than that, there is a scholarship program. There we go. That over the years has been utilized less. There's been a lot of federal regulation that's been able to be available to these people, and they've used that. It still does get utilized some, so I think it's a great program that we do. It's a flat budget. There's no change year over year, and pretty much everything that we budget to spend, we spend in this fund every year, so.
Yeah, that kind of covers scholarships and books for both active duty and for spouses of active duty out at
Yes.
the base.
Independence of active duty.
Pardon me?
Yes, independence as well.
Independence, yeah. Yep.
We have a lot of people for Autry that utilize that.
Okay.
Any questions on Vance? Pretty straightforward. Our last one tonight that we're going to go over is Enid Transit Authority, which is on page 182. Just want to go over a few things on the transit and how it runs. So it's an on-demand response service. Their hours of operations are 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. The cost of a transit ride is $2 if you schedule it in advance. If you schedule it the day of and they have availability, it costs $5. The transit gives approximately $40,000 or 40,000 rides a year. And they do offer punch cards. For the punch cards are regular price, but they're buy 3, get 1 free. So it's $20 for a punch card for 10 rides. But if you buy 3, then you get 10 rides for free, basically. And so we've been doing a great job pushing those out. We've had a lot of agencies throughout the city buy those for their people who utilize their services. So they've been doing a great job of marketing those to the individuals who need those services for the city. When we talk about their actual budget numbers, there are 3 main things that make up their revenue coming into this fund. They have transit revenue, which is made up of passenger fares, that $2 a ride or $5 a ride. They have on-vehicle advertising, which we have a part-time advertising tech that has been doing a great job getting some new things on our buses out there and getting some new graphics and flyers and recruiting some new people to that. And then we've also have contract services. So we may do some stuff for like DHS or other areas that need special accommodations for contracts with us. And so those are the 3 things that make up that transit revenue. Grant revenue, there are a multitude of grants that we get for this program. All of them are through the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. There's a RTAP program, which is if we're doing bus fares that originate and go outside of the city. So if we need to go take someone to Will Rogers Airport for them to make a flight, those types of things fall under that program. Revolving fund is through the state, and that is projected to be $99,000 this next year. There's a 5311 grant, which funnels through FTA down to ODOT and projecting to have $382,000 in 5311. And then this current year, we did have CARES funding, but we do not have that this year. That's why you see a pretty big decrease in grant revenue from FY23 to FY24. And then the transfer from the general fund, 385 this year, and we're proposing the same transfer to supplement their operations for transit services for our citizens. And then their expenditures in Enid Transit Authority, again, overall increase to their decrease, sorry, of $223,000, an increase of $57,000 in personnel. Again, that's an 8% increase. We reorganized the staffing here a little bit. We got rid of 4 part-time drivers and added 2 full-time drivers to help better meet the staffing needs and the requests that we were getting. We were having maybe some difficulty filling those positions with part-time and needed some people who were looking for full-time with benefits. And so we've had those people available to run the routes that we need to run to meet the demand. And then other than that, our fleet is aging a little bit, so they've had a little more maintenance and operations, and so we needed to make that adjustment as well. And then capital outlay did fall to 0 in next year's budget. We did have $300,000 in this year's budget that we plan to hopefully be bringing back in the next couple meetings to award to do a parking lot out of EPTA. Their parking lot's pretty bad and has needed some upgrades for quite a while, and we have specific dollars that can only be used for capital items for the transit. That will be funding that. So the main decrease there is coming from that one-time grant revenue. I do know that she does need some additional vehicles, so we are looking at a 5339 grant right now. And if we are awarded that, we'll bring it back later and do an appropriation at the time that it's awarded, like we do most other grant funding. So if there's any questions specifically, other than the two that I have noted for Mr. Stallings next time, I'd be glad to take notes on that so we can bring it back to you and make sure we get all your questions answered.
I'd like to add some commissioner homework. Everybody knows kind of what's going to be coming on for the next few meetings for budget. So if you would, take a look through those areas, and if there's something specifically you want covered in more detail, let's let them know up front so they can cover it at the time that they're actually going through it. So if there's nothing, that's fine, but if there's areas in the budget that you would like to see more detail, let's let them know up front so they can answer the questions when they're doing the material. Okay? Like giving homework.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. All right, that's all we have for the study session. We'll adjourn and reconvene at 6:30, so we stand adjourned.